right, so everyone's talking about this South Korea thing, right? It's got everyone kind of confused and a little bit worried.
Yeah, it's definitely pretty wild.
So, Seoul's famous for like K-pop and kimchi, all this fun stuff. But all of a sudden, we're seeing pictures of police and the military in the streets. And then you find out that President Yoon Suk Yeol just like declares martial law out of nowhere.
Yeah, and this isn't the 1980s we were talking about. This is 2024, so like what's going on?
Right. You'd think South Korea is a democracy with a strong economy and, all this advanced technology. They'd be the last place you'd see something like
Oh
this.
yeah.
So let's like really dive into this and try to make sense of it all, because I have a feeling there's a lot more to this story than what we're seeing on the
Oh
surface.
yeah,
I
definitely.
mean, what exactly does martial law even mean? It sounds scary.
Yeah, so basically it gives the military a ton of power to, keep things under control, but a lot of times this comes at the cost of people's freedom.
So no more karaoke nights.
Well, you could see things like limits on where you can go, what the media can say, and even military courts deciding cases instead of regular civilian courts.
So basically, it's like hitting the pause button on democracy, right? And letting the military run the show, which is not something you'd expect in a modern country like South Korea.
Exactly. And what's even weirder is that President Yoon just announced this out of the blue on TV.
Seriously, like
Yeah.
1 minute he's talking about economic policy, the next minute, boom, martial law.
Pretty much. He said it was because of the threat from North Korea and to get rid of people who are against the government, but honestly,
Okay, yeah, I was going to say there's got to be more to it than that.
a lot of experts think this was President Yoon's way of dealing with a political situation that's been a huge headache for him.
Okay, so what's the political backstory here?
Well, for starters, he's a lame duck president, which means he's in the last part of his term and doesn't have a ton of power. Plus, his party doesn't have control of the parliament.
Ah, so it's like trying to herd cats, basically.
Totally. He can't get any laws passed easily. He even had to cut back his budget plan because people wouldn't support it. And then on top of that,
Wait, there's more.
oh yeah, there's been all this talk about corruption, with him and his cabinet. Even his wife's been dragged into it.
Oof, that's not good.
It's really hurt people's trust in him, and now people are saying he should resign or even get impeached.
So he's got this political pressure cooker going on, and then he throws martial law into the mix.
And his approval ratings have been tanking, especially among younger women. They see him as being out of touch and kind of sexist.
So there have been protests.
Huge ones. For weeks now. So yeah, this whole martial law thing feels like a desperate move to grab back some control and shut down anyone who's criticizing him, and maybe even distract people from all his other problems. It's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline.
Oh, definitely. It totally backfired.
Yeah.
So did people just accept this?
Not a chance. There was instant pushback. Politicians from the other parties locked themselves in the parliament building and voted against it. Thousands of people were in the streets shouting for Yoon to quit.
Wow, so he really messed up.
Big time. And get this, even some people in his own party said it was a terrible idea, that it was against the Constitution.
Wow, so even his own people turned on him. What did he do?
Well, with everyone yelling at him from all sides, he ended up canceling the whole martial law thing within hours.
So much for that plan, huh?
It really shows you how divided things are in South Korean politics, and it makes you wonder what's going to happen next. This is really shaking people's faith in their democracy.
Right, it's like this whole thing has left the country kind of reeling,
Exactly. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. This political mess is tangled up with some serious economic problems that South Korea has been facing for a while. And honestly, the consequences of this economic downturn could affect us all.
Hold on. That's where things get really interesting. We're just getting warmed up, folks. We'll unpack all the economic stuff and explore how it could impact the rest of the world in the next part. Make sure you stick around for that. And if you're digging this kind of deep dive analysis, hit that subscribe button to stay tuned for more insightful breakdowns of the biggest events shaping our world. See you in a bit.
Welcome back. So, you know how we were talking about all the crazy political stuff happening in South Korea?
Yeah, like that whole martial law thing, it was nuts.
Well, that's actually just one piece of the puzzle. There's this whole other economic crisis brewing underneath, and it's been going on for a while.
So it's like there's this political drama playing out, and then in the background, there's this economic thriller going on at the same time.
Exactly, and you can't really understand one without the other. To figure out why President Yoon would pull a stunt like that, we need to look at what's going on with South Korea's economy. And one of the biggest warning signs is how much debt people have.
Debt, like credit cards and stuff.
Well, that too, but I'm talking about household debt, like mortgages and loans. It's actually over 1,800 trillion won.
Okay, that's got to be like a lot of money, but like how much is that really?
Think of it this way. It's basically 95% of South Korea's entire GDP.
95%. So basically their whole economy is almost drowning in debt. That's intense. But how did it get this bad?
There are a few reasons. For one thing, South Korea has had super low interest rates for years, which made it really easy for people to borrow money. And then there's also this like pressure in their society to, keep up with the Joneses, especially when it comes to buying a house or paying for your kids' education.
So everyone's trying to look successful even if they can't really afford it?
Yeah, and that's led to a situation where a lot of families are basically spending more than they earn.
So they're stuck in this debt trap.
Yeah.
But how does that affect the entire country's economy?
Well, think about it. When you're busy paying off your debts, you don't have much money left over to spend on other things, right?
I've been there.
So when everyone's in that situation, consumer spending drops. And that's a big problem because it's what drives a lot of economic activity. Yeah. And the less people spend, the weaker the economy gets.
This is like a downward spiral.
Exactly. And on top of all that, there's inflation, too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Everything's getting more expensive these days.
And that makes it even harder for people to make ends meet. They're getting squeezed from every direction.
So we've got debt, declining spending, and inflation all hitting South Korea at the same time.
Yeah.
But weren't you saying there are also problems coming from outside the country?
Oh, yeah. They've got some serious international challenges, too, especially when it comes to trade. South Korea's economy depends a lot on exports.
They make a lot of tech stuff and cars.
They're major players in those global markets,
Right.
but they're also stuck in the middle of this trade war between the U.S. and China.
Oh, yeah. Things have been tense between those two lately. But why is South Korea getting caught in the crossfire?
It's kind of unavoidable. They're close
Yeah.
allies with the U.S., but they also do a lot of business with China.
So they're trying to stay friends with both sides, but it's backfiring.
Exactly. They're getting pressure from both directions, and it's hurting their economy.
Okay, so that's a lot to deal with already, but I remember you mentioned something about these giant companies in South Korea that are adding to the problem.
Right, the cables
Cables, what are those?
for these massive family-run businesses like Samsung, Hyundai, LG. They've been around for decades, and they're a huge part of why South Korea's economy grew so fast.
So they're like the backbone of the country. What's wrong with that?
Well, the problem is that they've become so dominant that they're actually stifling competition and innovation.
So it's like a monopoly situation.
Kinda. The government has been helping them out for years with tax breaks, subsidies, all sorts of stuff. And that's made it really hard for smaller businesses to get a foothold.
So it's like they're too big to fail. But that doesn't sound like a good thing.
It's not. Because when you don't have competition, you don't have as much pressure to improve or come up with new ideas. And those cables, they're used to getting help from the government, so they might not be ready to adapt in a world that's constantly changing.
And aren't they struggling with all that debt too?
Oh yeah, big time. It's like they're trying to swim with these giant weights tied to their ankles.
So if these cables start to sink, the whole South Korean economy could go down with them.
It's a real risk. And, when we look at all these factors together, the debt, the declining spending, the trade wars, the problems with the cables, it makes you wonder if this desperation is what drove President Yoon to declare martial law.
Like it was a last-ditch effort to try and gain control of the situation.
It's a theory worth considering. And it brings us to another important question. What does all this mean for the rest of us? Could South Korea's problems spill over and affect the global economy?
So we've talked about all the political drama and the economic headaches, but the big question is, should we all be freaking out? Like, is this a sign that the whole world economy is about to go kaput?
Well, I wouldn't say it's time to start hoarding ramen noodles just yet, but it's definitely a situation worth watching closely. South Korea is not some tiny island out there. What happens there affects everyone, especially in today's global economy.
Right, everything's so interconnected these days. But how exactly could South Korea's problems impact people like us? Just going about our daily lives.
Well, think back to those supply chains we were talking about. South Korea is a major producer of semiconductors, those little chips that are in everything, from our phones to our computers to even our cars.
Oh, yeah, so basically they're in everything.
Pretty much. So if there are any disruptions there, whether it's because of the political instability or the economic slowdown, it could mean delays in getting those products or even higher prices.
So that new phone I've been wanting might be harder to get or more expensive because of what's happening in South Korea.
It's definitely a possibility. And it's not just tech stuff either. Those cables we discussed, like Hyundai and Kia, they're major car manufacturers. Any problems they have could affect dealerships all over the world.
So maybe I should hold off on buying that new car for now.
Probably a good idea to wait and see how things play out. But
Yeah.
it's not just about the stuff we buy. There's a bigger picture here, too. South Korea is also a big player in global financial markets.
So like Wall Street and all that.
Exactly. If investors start getting nervous about South Korea, they might pull their money out. And that could create a lot of volatility, not just in Korea, but potentially in other countries, too.
Like a domino effect, right?
Exactly. One thing leads to another. But for our listeners who might be planning trips to South Korea or have family there, what's the latest with travel and visas?
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of people are probably wondering about that.
As of today, December 3rd, 2024, there haven't been any official changes to tourist visa policies, but things could change quickly. Anyone with travel plans should definitely check with their local embassy or consulate to get the most up-to-date information, and of course, keep an eye on our channel for any breaking news.
We'll be sure to keep everyone posted on any developments.
Yeah.
But beyond the practical stuff like travel, this whole situation really makes you think about, the state of the world.
It definitely shows that even in this day and age, things can be pretty fragile. Our systems are all so interconnected. The economy, politics, technology, if one part starts to wobble, it can shake the whole thing.
So it's more important than ever to stay informed,
Mm,
right? Not just about, celebrity gossip or whatever, but about what's happening in the world, because it does affect us whether we realize it or not.
absolutely. And that's why we do what we do here at the Deep Dive. We try to
Yeah.
connect the dots between these global events and your everyday life and give you the information you need to understand what's going on.
Exactly. And if you're finding this deep dive helpful, please subscribe to our channel and tell your friends about it. The more informed we all are, the better equipped we'll be to handle whatever challenges come our way.
Now, before we wrap up, I think it's important to remember that behind all the economic data and political maneuvering, there are real people in South Korea who are being affected by all of this.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the big picture, but we shouldn't forget about the human cost of these situations.
Exactly. Think about the stress of trying to make ends meet, the fear of losing your job, the anxiety about the future. It takes a toll on people.
So it's a reminder to be compassionate and understanding right. These aren't just abstract events. They have real consequences for people's lives.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap things up. Stay informed, stay engaged, and remember, we're all in this together.
Great advice. And who knows, maybe by learning about what's happening in South Korea, we can gain some insights into our own societies and economies and make better choices for the future. That's it for this deep dive, folks. Thanks for joining us.
So until next time,
Stay curious, stay informed.
and remember,
Even in the face of economic turmoil.
there's always hope for a brighter future.
And maybe a really good sale on kimchi